I think Alexander Pope said that Shakespeare was very clever in that he didn't just manage to get into the Roman mind when he wrote plays like Julius Caesar and Coriolanus, but he managed to show the difference between the Roman mind in Julius Caesar and in the earlier time of Coriolanus. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I mean, Shakespeare didn't read that widely, but he read deeply, and he read enough of Roman history to be aware of the evolution of the Roman Republic, the Roman Empire. He, in the way he adapted his reading, his Roman plays tend to be based on this great collection of the lives of the noble Romans and Grecians by Plutarch. In adapting his reading, he really does seem to bring alive the very particular historical moment within ancient Rome. People sometimes say that Julius Caesar just seems to transpose the politics of Elizabethan England onto antiquity. To some extent it does that, and everybody actually did that at the time. It was by reading about the politics of classical antiquity that the politicians of the Elizabethan age defined their own positions. But Shakespeare doesn't just do that, because what he really sees in the case of Julius Caesar is that this is a pivotal moment in Roman history. In Coriolanus, and indeed his dramatic poem, The Rape of Lucrece, he looks back to early Roman history. He looks back to the moment when the old emperors were expelled and the Republic was established. Julius Caesar is a play about this key moment when Julius Caesar is going to be offered the crown, and you'd have the possibility of the Republic being turned back into an empire. You then have the Republican conspiracy, the defense of the Republic coming from the conspirators. But then, of course, that dissolves into civil war. And then, in a way, Shakespeare leaves the story unfinished. He finishes it in Antony and Cleopatra, which tells the story of how for a time Rome was divided between three men, the so-called triumvirate. And then at the end of that, the new imperial regime was established under Augustus Caesar. So incredibly important transitional moment. I mean, it's genuinely the case that the assassination of Julius Caesar was widely seen as, the absolute turning point in Roman history. In a way, it was the most famous political assassination in history prior to that of J.F. Kennedy.
And Brutus, how sympathetic do we feel to Brutus? He's a Stoic, really, isn't he?
Well, it's very interesting what Shakespeare does with the role of Brutus, because he's doing three or four things simultaneously. Brutus, in one sense, is speaking for the values of the Republic, the need to defend the Republic against the possibility of it moving towards monarchy, towards tyranny, and so on. But Brutus also is a kind of intellectual. He clearly identifies his philosophy with that of Stoicism, which was a very widely held Roman belief. But Stoicism is also a sort of slightly passive philosophy. It slightly says, fortune will do what fortune will do. We mustn't be influenced by it. There's a little bit of sort of washing one's hands of political involvement there. Equally, there's the question of the influence of his wife, and a real sense of how can he reconcile his friendship with Caesar with his sense of political duty. That idea of a man torn between public and private selves, between his philosophical belief, his friendship, his family, his sense of himself, but also his sense of duty. I don't think he is weak. He's troubled.
And trying to keep, in the Stoic way, emotion out of everything, isn't
Yes.
I suppose that to an extent this is a play about rhetoric and the uses of rhetoric and the awful things that can result from rhetoric. So you have this speech by Brutus at Caesar's funeral, followed by this amazing, extraordinary speech by Antony. What do you think he's telling us about rhetoric, Shakespeare?
Shakespeare is tremendously influenced. Shakespeare is tremendously interested in the power of words. His education in school was an education in the use of language, and particularly the use of the Latin language. The idea that words can change people's minds, that words influence people, that is the art of the poetic dramatist to use words. So it's always the case that when you have a character who uses words persuasively, they are persuading both an on-stage audience and an off-stage audience. And what Shakespeare loves to reveal in big formal rhetorical speeches, first that of Brutus, then that of Antony, is the power of words. But in the back of your mind, you always have that sense, is the person manipulating the words actually doing it for their own sort of nefarious purposes? Is there some sense that Antony is a cunning user of language who is not so very far from Iago in Othello?
What do you feel? Do you feel that Antony is riding his emotions but also exploiting? I mean, what is he doing in that amazing speech?
I think he's exactly doing both things at once. Yes, at one level he's tapping into his emotions, the tremendous sort of sense of friendship, betrayal, those very powerful values. But at the same time, he is himself being a very cunning political operator in seeing how, by using the language, using the very formal, elaborate rhetoric, he can change the minds of the audience.
How important is the supernatural and all the omens and dreams against this very rational world of Rome? Shakespeare obviously does this deliberately, introduces all this. How important is it? That?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that these leading characters in the play, they are sort of philosophers, and Cassius in particular. I mean, he speaks of holding fast to the philosophy of Epicurus. The Epicurean philosophy sort of doesn't really believe in divine intervention, and yet in the course of the play, we do hear about strange events happening that appear to be the gods telling us what's right, what's wrong, what's going on, telling us that we're living in a disturbing time. So I think again Shakespeare is just leaving it open to the audience to say, do you believe there is some kind of divine fate controlling these events, or are human beings responsible for their own actions and free to determine their own destiny? He gives you both possibilities, leaves it to you, the audience, you, the reader, to make up your own mind.
One modern critic, I think Kapilia Khan, says that he shows us Rome as a place of malfunctioning emotion. Love which is either crushed by stoic repression or which is manipulated and turned into aggression by Antony. Do you think that's true?
I think it's certainly the case that this play and another one of Shakespeare's classical plays, Timon of Athens, are the only two plays among Shakespeare's 38 or more plays in which women have a very marginal role. Yes, Brutus's wife, Portia, Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, they do play an important part, but it's a very limited part. If you think about in Shakespeare's other Roman plays, Coriolanus, where the mother plays a hugely important part, and Antony and Cleopatra, in which Cleopatra is the absolute dominant figure. It is a very, very male world, and that male stoical notion of Romanness is all to do with excluding the emotions and the side that is traditionally associated with the female. And Shakespeare does seem to be saying there is something dysfunctional about this community because it doesn't allow for a female presence. And let's remember, this is written towards the end of the reign of Queen Elizabeth. And of course, one of the great triumphs of Queen Elizabeth was the way that she managed to embody in her own sort of self-mythology the qualities both of the male and the female.